we'll maybe just work our way down the panel this way. But so in the department, in the state of Texas, the entity that ultimately manages the entire criminal justice system, we're blessed to be able to have Brian Collier with us today, who kind of rides herd on that whole enterprise, which is a very, very important one, not only for the state of Texas, but frankly for the entire country. So Brian, thank you for being with us today, and tell us a little bit more about not only your agency, but where you kind of find yourself in this.
Sure. Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to be here today. I'm Brian Collier. I'm the Executive Director of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. The Texas Department of Criminal Justice in Texas is adult prisons, and that's what most people think of when they hear about the agency. But it also is parole supervision, and it's also probation funding and oversight. We provide those two key pieces to probation. So in a way, outside of the judiciary, we are the adult criminal justice system in Texas, which is a good thing to have because you see all pieces of it and how they interlink together within the agency. Obviously, our prison population is the largest state prison population in the country, although post-COVID, it's dropped by 20,000 offenders. So we're down to around 100 in the low 120s today. But overall, parole, probation, key pieces of the system together. I have been in the system for 35 years. I started when I was 7, and but actually started when I was in college as a switchboard operator. And back then, a gentleman who had run the system, Dr. George Beto, helped me get a job as a switchboard operator while I was going to college at Sam Houston State. And then after I graduated, I thought I was a correctional officer for a while. Then I thought I'd go to law school and was going to move to Houston and become a parole officer for a little while to save the money for law school in the fall, and fell in love with the work. And that's it. And have loved it ever since. I've had a lot of different roles in the agency. I've worked in programs and parole, was the deputy executive director, but have truly loved every minute of it. And it's a great place to work. I love working with people, and that's what we're in. We're in the people business. We're in the public safety business, and that's a lot more than just locking people up. That's a lot about trying to return people better than they were when they came in. Yeah. So it's for me, it's been a very fulfilling career.
Yeah, well said, well said. And as a lot of, it's no secret to people in Texas, but sometimes people outside of the state of Texas have started to kind of get the memo over the last 8 or 10 years that some of the most cutting edge work on the programmatic and policy levels have happened here in the state of Texas. And so, as we talk about what's next, I personally always feel like it's, I kind of feel compelled to say that in the midst of a lot of very heightened vocabulary and tone right now in America, there actually are a lot of people that have been caring about this issue and working on these issues for a pretty long time.
Yes.
And so it's not just an epiphany that's happened in the last 6 months, that there are good people that have invested literally lives, their entire careers on these things. And so thank you, Brian, for being one of those people. Okay. Another one of those people is also with us today, Christina Melton Crane. So Christina also has held some appointed positions in various parts of the Texas criminal justice system that she'll tell us about, but also several years ago started a program that is becoming something of a kind of gold standard, so to speak, of how to help people transition and segue back into their communities, into their families, et cetera. So would you tell us a little bit, not only your background, but also about Unlocking Doors?
Certainly. Thank you, Tim. And again, thank you for the opportunity today. I'm Christina Melton Crane, and I'm a Dallas attorney who found herself kind of forced into the criminal justice system. I was appointed in 2001 by Governor Perry to be on the Board of Criminal Justice, the board that oversees the department that Brian is the executive director of. And in 2003, I found myself hitting that terrible session that we had in January of that year with about a $10 billion deficit, I believe, as chairman of the board. I've been the first and only woman to chair that board, and it's been very interesting. I took it upon myself to figure out what we could do differently in the agency, and had folks like Brian and others who were very receptive to the notion of reentry, bonding families, doing whatever we could do to help those who are incarcerated that we knew would be leaving. And so we created a number of programs. One in particular was a mentoring program with Big Brothers Big Sisters called Amachi, Texas, where we went and actually took the wonderful model that they have for mentoring and applied it to those children who have parents who are involved in the criminal justice system. I got off the board in 2008, and something I had seen just stayed with me, and that was that there was this huge gap between someone getting out of prison or on parole and probation, supervision, and getting to all the services that they so need in order to make things work for them and to move forward. That includes housing, employment, medical, mental health, transportation, to name the 4 barriers that I consider, or at least in our work, we've considered to be the big 4. And so in 2010, I founded Unlocking Doors, a nonprofit that works statewide to brokerage relationships with those individuals coming directly out of prison and jails, or those already in the community. So all you have to have is a criminal justice background and be 17 or older. And we connect you with all those services based on a plan that we put in place for you. I'm passionate about it because of what I saw, and because of my state service and the opportunity to be able to serve. I was able to have a firsthand view of the gaps. And so have kind of taken it upon myself to just, instead of talking about it, do something about it. And it's become a great passion with me, and I get to work with folks like Brian, et cetera, John Kofus, et cetera, and it's a great thing.
Yeah. So, I think one of the cool things, and I'm admittedly completely biased in this as a native Texan myself, but there's almost a certain kind of rebelliousness about Texans, where instead of kind of seeing things the way they are and just defaulting to, well, I guess that's the way that things are. Texans, there's something in our DNA that just says, if that's broke, I'm definitely going to fix it. I'm definitely going to fix that. And so, I think a lot of people that come in contact with the justice system, while we see it's a critical, it's an irreplaceable portion of our government and our society, but there are gaps, there are holes, sort of blind spots, if you will, that if you interact in a consistent way, sometimes even just anecdotal ways, but particularly in a consistent way, you start noticing a lot of these patterns, these gaps that you think, I'm not sure that anybody sort of is pointing out the fact that, we're seeing a lot of the exact same people coming back into the system, or people from similar scenarios in the Houston area, the Dallas area, the San Antonio area, all coming into our systems. And so, the problem solvers I've found in Texas oftentimes gravitate to this realm, this industry, because it is so impactful. So a lot of folks may or may not actually have formal professional experience in this, but kind of find their way interacting with the system in some of these similar situations, which leads us to Rick Figueroa, who has kind of been as one of those problem solvers. So somebody that comes from a financial advisor and finance industry, so in my mind, I think having worked with some bankers and other finance people in other parts of the country, they definitely think in kind of how society cascades into other areas. And when you find a mind that has the ability to sort of diagnose problems and then look for solutions and some of those ripple or cascading effects, you want those people on the team. And both Governor Rick Perry, the previous governor of Texas, as well as our current governor, Greg Abbott, have recognized that in Rick. So tell us a little bit about how, I guess, first Governor Perry and then also Governor Abbott sort of brought you into some of these conversations and what you currently do in your role functioning with the Department of Licensing and Regulation.
Well, Tim, I'll take a little issue. Being on Wall Street, I think, qualifies me for the criminal justice system expertise. Touche. 22 years at Wall Street. I think I've seen my share.
Yeah.
Just for the record, I'm just saying. Maybe more qualified than Brian, which I'm just saying. So I'm a financial advisor, I do wealth management for a living, but I got a call from Governor Perry back then, and he said, "Hey, Rick, we need you on this insurance board." And I said, "Right, great, I know insurance. And apparently, if you're licensed, you can't be on the insurance board." So he says, "Sorry, but I'm gonna put you on this judicial council." And I said, "What is that?" And he goes, "Well, you oversee the back office operation of the courts, OCA, Office of Court Administration." I said, no offense, Governor, but my whole life I've spent trying to avoid judges, lawyers, and courtrooms. I said, if I don't see any of those, I think that's a great life, in my opinion. And especially where I grew up. And so 'cause I would say about 6 out of the 8 kids that I grew up with have been incarcerated. So I'm probably a stat, maybe a very thin line away from somebody you're talking about versus somebody on the stage, which I think we should all consider ourselves that in some way, form, or fashion. But going through the OC, working with the OCA, working with the Judicial Council, I saw a lot of operational efficiencies, how the counties and the courts operate in silos, the inefficiencies of the shared services, and I just was able to do a little bit of insight and do that, and that was a great and created first shared solution to the courts. It was one of those moments. I'll tell you a quick story. I went and walked. Wallace Jefferson was Chief Justice then, and he asked me to. Governor Perry cut the budget, and he asked me to go evaluate this court system. And I told the chief, I said, I could spend 90 hours a week for 2 years and not know what this is. I can't even speak lawyer talk. And he said, just go look. And I went back and I looked, and I came back and I sat in his office in his chamber. I said, Judge, I said, I got some good news and bad news. And he said, well, what's the bad news? I said, your court system stinks. And I said, it's got a lot of challenges. I said, you have no shared services or best practices associated with it. We got to do something different. And he said, what does that mean? I said, well, I picked up a pen and I said, I want you to think if I'm the CEO of a company that makes this pen, right? And I have 254 divisions that make this pen, right? We all green, blue, but basically all I do is make this pen. Now I have 254 accounting departments, 254 IT departments, 254 procurements, 200 payable departments. You would put me in jail for fiduciary reasons. I said, but that's how the system works. So we got to do better. I said, but the good news is it's an easy fix because you got amazing people in this court system. I said, we just got to get them together, get them talking. And so we created a shared solutions and some great byproducts. And so no good deed goes unpunished. And so the governor said, hey, Rick. And it was Governor Abbott. He said, I got this thing called TDLR. And I couldn't even spell TDLR. Aggie, I couldn't spell TDLR. So I was like, what's TDLR? He goes, what's this regulations and licensing? Again, once again, I'm avoiding licensing and regulation my whole life. You're sticking me in places I avoid. And so, but he goes, it oversees, tow truck drivers, cosmetology, barbers, massage therapists. And I go, well, these are the people that I grew up with. Those are minority driven vocations. So I like to make a difference there. And so I was on there for a couple of years, and then the current chairman went on to work for TDLR, and I was taken as chairman. And so I was able to use some insight into a couple of House bills that we'll talk about a little later, kind of come through the observation of seeing the processes associated with the vocations and the criminal justice system and the recidivism rates and reentry rates. And so, I'm the Forrest Gump, I guess, on this stage. I just kind of bumped into this thing. So it's been exciting.
Well, it's it can tend to get into your blood a little bit, that once you not only interact with systems and see the ability for systems to change and to be able to serve people better, but at least for me, I think the real differences for me come just in relationships, people that you meet who either have gotten out and have really flourished, or who maybe got caught up into the system in disproportionate ways. So I think that the human element of this is what I think it sounds like drives each of us in different ways, and kind of brought us into some of this. One of the things that I want to frame a lot of our conversation for the rest of the day on that we are making progress. So even on the federal level, I think Pastor Loudon earlier alluded to the fact that on the federal level, for instance, these conversations tend to be sort of a man without a country, so to speak. So the folks on the left don't want to talk about progress that's being made because they don't want to give credit to anybody on the political right. And people on the political right don't want to talk about progress that's being made because they are afraid that certain other people on the right are going to start attacking them. And so we end up actually making progress, and nobody gets credit, and nobody actually knows about any of this stuff except the individual people who are like, that was amazing. They literally changed the policy that changed my life, that changed my family, and I'm not allowed to talk about it anywhere. So, as we move into the tail end of 2020 on the federal side, we're actually about 155,000 are actually in incarcerated federal facilities right now. The all-time high was actually in 2013 at 219,200 and some change individuals that were in the federal system. And so literally in the last 6.5 years, basically, you've seen from 1980, we had 24,000 people in the federal system. 1990, we had about 65,000 people in the federal system. By the year 2000, we were at about 134,000 people. 2013 up to 219,000, and now that number has pulled back to 154,000 as of last Thursday. So we're seeing a course correction, if you will, no pun intended, or maybe that is intended. The corrections facility is actually receiving some correction. So that's on the federal side, but similarly, like you just said, Brian, here in the state of Texas, tell us maybe a little bit in response to COVID, some of the responses that the state has done here, and some of that is certainly in response to the challenges of COVID, but that also may eventually lead to some new innovative practices once we've overcome the immediate pressing challenge of COVID, if that makes sense. So tell us a little bit about some of your responses in the last 5 or 6 months.
COVID for our prison system, and that's the most glaring issue, the most glaring piece of it that affects it. It's been a significant challenge for Texas as well as other prison systems around the country because of the environment of prisons and the fact that social distancing is very difficult in a prison setting. You're congregating large numbers of people together. So we started back in late February working with our healthcare partners on policy protocols. We had pandemic flu policies, things like that, but clearly those weren't sufficient. So we had to build policies specific for this. But as we started early, we started making our own masks because you couldn't get them. So we flipped all of our garment factories to making masks for our staff, but our offender population. So we had everyone in mask by early April and continue to deal with and begin to see COVID around the system. We have throughout the system seen it go to all-time highs in the summer, down to low numbers of only a couple of hundred of positive cases just a few weeks ago. So we're back down at a low number, but certainly not at a place that I would say we're good or we are all hands on deck doing everything we can as we have throughout to clean, distance, get better, refine, be smarter about how we do everything we do inside, from any movement to the coordination of programming to people in that environment, because that is something clearly we didn't do before. We're certainly now able to deliver programming via other avenues that we never did before. So classroom settings can't be used in all settings. So we go in and we do other options, and we've done that and learned how to do that. We've begun a video visitation program that we had in place. We were just about to roll it out before COVID, actually, for people with long distances between their loved one and the prisons. And we were able to flip that to use now because we've had visitation stalled since last April, and making that family connection is key. We've also started taking inmates back in the system. We stopped intake back in April, and we started taking intake again in July, and moved very slowly, methodically on how we do everything, because buses are half filled. You've got your spacing and all the other protocols that you have in place. But it has been, in my 35 years, by far the most significant operational challenge we've ever faced. But by far, our team has done, and our staff have done, a phenomenal job. If you see a correctional officer in a uniform, give them a handshake and tell them thanks for being a hero, because those folks every day are going into locations where they may know it's there, and they still go in and do their job, and they do it and have done extremely well. Our parole staff, when you talk about innovations, because there's a lot in the criminal justice system that even the momentum of stopping intake and the courts slowing down is an opportunity, because courts having those options of what am I going to do with someone now who may have been out now for 6 months in a pretrial setting who wasn't before, those options may push people toward probation, which would be good if it does. You're also going to have parole supervision, probation. We had to find different ways to do supervision. So we became a field model. Coming into the office to do reporting, that's not going to work. That hasn't worked. So we went to the field and changed our model of how we do supervision. We did more by FaceTime, more by phone, things that we would have never thought about, but we're not going to throw them away. As I've told our leadership team, probably the worst thing we could do is go back and do, when this is over, and it will end at some point, but when it is over, the worst thing we could do is go back and do everything like we used to do it. We have to take the new things that we've learned and adjust and make those amendments. But we're using tablets for visitation on some facilities. We're using just things that we would have never, you always had obstacles. But in every obstacle is usually an opportunity. And many times we've used that just for our advantage to try something different because we knew we had to, but we also knew here's a good excuse to have done it. So some of the pressure that you might get otherwise is gone. And a lot of that will prove to be things that hold in the system for, I think, the long haul. But programming differently, learning how to do many of those things differently, learning how to do field supervision more effectively, but differently, has proven to be very helpful. And less need for space, less need for lots of other things as well, but you can do it more effectively.
Well said. And I think that challenges, even crises, can cause us to do things to kind of turn to options that otherwise we may never even dreamt would be on sort of the table. But when we're forced to look critically and think really creatively, I think that's one of the hallmarks of true leadership is finding ways to just make something work when there is no other option. We must solve this problem. This is not, we don't have 2 years to think about this. We don't have committees that we can, appoint to start to, we have to fix this now. And I commend you and your team, Brian, for that innovation and that leadership and trying to figure out ways to not only keep Texas safe, but also to keep facilities, offenders, probation officers, correctional officers safe, and I think that you've done a commendable job of striking a very delicate, very challenging balance. Christina, I want to maybe turn a little bit to just the notion of innovation. So we talked about innovation in the context of COVID, but I want to just address innovation in the year 2020 or now 2021 as we're on the front porch, if you will, of moving into the future. There's a lot of economic and fiscal uncertainty. There's a lot of social and even racial uncertainty. Right. There's a lot of international uncertainty for that matter. And one of the things that I have become very sensitive to is we can lose track of the fact that a lot of times, a lot of folks go into facilities and in some ways kind of the world almost passes them by. So, I mean, I know a lot of people that are in facilities that when they get out, they're like, I've never had an email address. You're like, in the year 2018, you don't have an email address. You've never sent or received an email. This is fascinating. So, I mean, I feel like when I was a little older, when I went back to grad school, and I was the only person that wasn't on Facebook, and I was like, "What's a Facebook?" I've lived in the deserts of India for the last little while. I don't I mean, when it's like the currency, that's the cultural currency going on, and you're re-injected into this situation. So, I'm curious, how do you help people within y'all's organization? Not only find employers themselves, but start to internalize the softer side, the soft skills we talked about last time. About how to reintegrate into a very fast-moving current.
Absolutely. Well, there's a lot of moving parts, and no size fits everybody. And I think that's really the notion behind our organization is that we craft a plan that's going to fit your needs. So your plan is not going to look like Brian's. And it's going to depend on, maybe Brian was able to get some technical education while he was incarcerated, but you weren't. So he knows a little bit more about maybe what Facebook is or what email is. You may not, okay? And so what we have to do is do a full assessment to determine your specific needs and where you sit at the time of intake in our program. And then we can go from there. So where Brian may not need as much job readiness skills when it comes to, emailing his resume to a potential employer, or how to use not a cell phone, but a PDA, what social media really means, you may need more of that kind of training. So we have specific partners that are going to deal with every one of those elements. So where we might not have to send Brian to some of those more technical job readiness or technical folks for instruction, we would send you.
Mhm.
Okay. It is critical in the employment space now to know technology. I mean, there's no way around it, because a good number of the employers that partner with us to actually get their workforce filled, many of the jobs are, you submit your application via email or via some kind of database. And so many times pre-COVID, before, we went back to not seeing clients in person, that's a whole nother element. We have a whole operation where a room that's set aside with client computers. So they're not on our server or the mainframe, but they are specifically there to do resumes, to teach technical training, and to also get your applications in for different employers. So a broker will take a client and they will sit down together and they'll walk through the application so that they learn. Let's do one together so that you see how you have to apply for Koch Industries, or you have to apply for a job with Forterra or whoever. And then you've got 3 more applications to do. Now let's let you do one and see how you do. So again, it all depends on the client. It depends on how much help they need, how much training they need, but we're never going to let somebody get by without getting some kind of assistance, because this is the world we live in. COVID has taught us as an organization, and I felt like we were sort of savvy, okay? Because we had IT application, we have a client database that's web-based, that's part of our local hospital format, and we learned, boy, we had a lot to learn and a lot of things we can do differently now that COVID has hit us and we have to go virtual. So in fact, 2 weeks ago, we hold an annual symposium every year to help educate the public, educate stakeholders, et cetera. Brian's always one of the speakers. We did it virtually this time. And when we normally have 300 people who are able to view it, this year we had 900 people sign up. So we're finding better ways to do things, not just how to serve the client, but maybe how to expand our reach, how to get more information out to the public. And like you said, there's a silver lining if you look for it.
So one of the things I'm hearing Christina allude to is being able to customize the service to the specific needs of people that are in facilities or in the system that are eventually going to be reentering. But Rick, there also are commonalities, and so I wonder if you can maybe speak a little bit to, in the realm of licensure regulation, what are some of the kind of prevailing or common obstacles that a lot of people experience when they're coming out, and then also any potential. You allude a little bit to a couple of prospective pieces of legislation that may be in discussion now, but talk a little bit about common issues and some policy solutions that we may be able to come to in the next several months.
So, my criminal background is not, it's my juvenile areas, but not my adult areas. But I understand that there's a lot of mindsets that go into trying to re-engineer the mind of somebody who's been incarcerated and get them back into this mindset, which is what you were talking to. But the worst thing we can do is manage the lowest common denominator. I think that's a horrible way to manage, right? Because it just you cannot put that out there. You have to adjust, and the TDLR is an amazing organization. It really is. I mean, I've been blessed to help lead that, but they do an amazing job. 40 licensures. I mean, there's we oversee now weights and measurements and fuels and testing. So the legislature really leans on TDLR a lot. And one of the things that we do is, as a commissioner, we sit and listen to stories of people who've been incarcerated and come back and say, I've been incarcerated for 5 years, 6 years. I want my license back to go fix ACs. When I'm looking at this guy, right, and I'm thinking, if I don't feel safe with you going to my house with my wife or my teenage daughter to fix the AC, I can't send them to your house, right? That's just a gut feel, right?
Sure.
The state of Texas, the people of Texas are our paramount responsibility. I cannot do that, right? So there I'm in this quandary. So I got to thinking, I said, but I'm okay with you go to a TPPF and fix their AC. I'm okay if you go to a new construction, but just walk into a house with somebody, if a young lady's by herself or something, that's a high bar, right? I mean, half the boys that my daughter dated, I wouldn't trust. I mean, you know, just for the record of that. So you have to think about this, right?
We just got
Yeah.
pretty personal.
Just for the record, right? This one is married. He's a Marine, so he passed the test. So House Bill 1342 allowed us, and it passed, this 86 legislature allowed us to restrict the licensing. So now I keep pointing to you, so you're just happy to be here, but now I can give you your license, but now I'm going to have you go to new construction. And the employer is going to be responsible for monitoring, and you're going to go to commercial, and so commercial buildings. So then it allowed me a lane. It created an arrow in my quiver that I was able to take on and say, okay, and we've issued out for them, and it's amazing because you got to think the ROI on this guy is amazing. $50,000, I don't know what it costs to incarcerate, $50,000 a year versus making 50. It's $100,000 in Wall Street. I'll take that all day long, right? And so those little adjusting those non-common denominator abilities, we don't do that to everybody, but it's an opportunity. The other one, I think the restriction that was kind of the silent killer was the enormous number of hours that it took to get a license, right? It was 1,500 hours to get a cosmetology license.
Wow.
EMT was 750. Now, I'm not a barber, right? And I don't play one on TV. I'm not a cosmetologist, but that's a lot of hours. And so we took a hard look, and we asked the industry, we asked the legislatures, we asked the students, we asked colleges, and they came up with 1,000 hours. Now, is that the right number? I don't know, but I think it's better than 1,500 because they all agreed. And so that opportunity came through another House bill. And so the reduction of hours, because we have to figure out how to get them in the system as fast as possible and as efficiently as possible. And not to mention, maybe 1,500 hours was appropriate 25 years ago when learning was a different modules. Now it's more efficient and more impactful and whatever the case may be. So those two are big barriers, to be able to adjust and give me some arrows to commissioners or to people who issue out licenses that we can do it conditionally and adjust and modify, and also to reduce the barriers to entry so that they can get in there and get the licensing that they need.
So some of this is barriers to employment from an employee's perspective, but there also are barriers to employment from an employer's perspective. So talk a little bit, Christina, about just thinking through how can we incent employers or protect, for that matter, employers who really actually are. There is a bit of a sea change happening even now.
Yes.
Of people who are wanting to do this, but maybe they're concerned about litigation, or maybe their insurance covers their coverage may even be a barrier for employers, right? So,
That's
so speak
correct.
to that a little bit.
So we already have a couple things in play. You've got fidelity bonds that an employer can take advantage of that protect them if they're on a specific employee. So if that employee does something, then you're protected. There are some specific insurances in play, but not many employers know about them or take advantage of them. The incentivizers are really, you've got tax credits both at the state and federal level. But there's not really much else we have in play right now. And so there's a lot of conversation going on right now between legislators, even Congress, about what are things we can put in place that are going to incentivize and protect the employer to take on this second chance employee. I think the majority of employers that we talk with or work with want to do this. I don't think there's a question of them not wanting to. It's when they start thinking, well, if I have a hiccup, if something happens with someone I have taken on, then I'm going to get sued. Here we go, domino effect. And so we have actually started what's called an employment council, where we've taken the specific employers that work with us and give jobs to our clients, and we've created a think tank group with that group themselves. And we have started meeting quarterly. The purpose of that group is so that we can educate them on things they're not aware of, like the tax credits or other incentives that are already there. I was shocked when I found that many of these big companies weren't even aware of this.
Yeah.
Second, though, we want to hear from them. I mean, as a lawyer, I get it. I get liability all day long. That is lawyer lingo, and right, we talk about it all day. So, but there's more to it than just getting sued. It's for instance, and I'll take one group of offenders, sex offenders, for instance. We have a ton, and Brian, what's the number that are coming out annually from TDCJ?
About 5,000.
5,000, okay, to our Texas communities that have to register as a sex offender in Texas. And so, you know, you've got these people that are coming out. They're going to recidivate if we don't do something with them. Most of them want to work. Most of them want to be productive. But the problem is, because of higher liability with this group, you know, you're not going to get many employers who are willing to take them on, and you're not going to get a lot of housing tenements or landlords who are willing to take them in. The issue becomes, we throw, from a policy standpoint, we throw every type of sex offender into one pot. So you've got the guy that's had sex with the 15-year-old, and you've got the serial pedophile, all in one pot. Now, when I'm talking to an employer that is pretty big in a number of states, they bring up on their own, without me having to even, you know, mention this. You know what? I know we do that. I know that we plop everybody in the same bucket. But you know what? I'm not really worried about the guy that had sex with the 15-year-old. He was 18, and, you know, it was one of those kind of situations. But I'm worried about the guy on the other end, the serial pedophile or the rapist. So you know what? I've got, to Rick's point, I've got positions where I could actually hire that guy and put him over in this job in a warehouse or by himself, or limit the liability I'm going to have and still give that guy a job and purpose. And so those are the kind of conversations that we're starting to have that are making an impact and a difference in how employers look at hiring our clients.
Mhm. Yeah. Brian, similar to that end, from your all's perspective as an agency, how do you interact with employers who are maybe even wanting to start to do trainings, you know, for instance, in facilities? How can we provide some protections for employers to incent them and protect them from some of the risk involved?
I think one of the most important things we have to do is be a real partner and actually help them find the right candidate for what they want to do, and help them find a candidate that's going to get us the best outcome together, and work with them closely. So I think one is us courting and working with those employers, but two, being flexible and open. We've had companies that came in and said, you have a factory and you do it this way. Could you modify it this way? And then your people could be easily employed in our area, and we can make those modifications and do it. We've had others approach us about setting up just an internal training program specifically for their labor market, and being, I think, open, being flexible, understanding the end game that we're looking for, which is public safety, because that person's going to be somebody who can successfully reintegrate, and that's going to improve public safety for all of us. I think that's what we have to do as corrections, is we have to become a regular partner and step up to the plate and actually be a real partner with them and take the risk with them and work with them on how they get the right candidate, how we give them the best we can give them, and how we help them if there's any issues.
Yeah. Well said. So tell you what, why don't we'll take a couple of questions, and then we'll kind of close after that. Any particular questions for starters? I know one of the federal conversations that's happening, that's starting to sort of percolate, I'd say, in DC on some of these things is, and Christina, you alluded to it, and as we kind of talked offline before this, is the notion of historically underutilized businesses.
Yes,
So there are various loan programs, training programs, grants, et cetera, for companies who are owned and managed by various minorities, and I think that expressly including criminal records as part of that. They're very sizable programs usually through Small Business Administration, and so that may be a new opportunity, not only for entrepreneurial programs across the country, but also for hiring and retention and training programs. So I think that when we delve into this, I think if there is a true sort of culture or will towards innovation, I almost feel like that is a more important variable than the specific programs. Like just getting smart people thinking critically about this and trying to find a solution is actually the most viable and valuable momentum builder, I think, in all of this. We might have one question back here. I can hear you.
We can hear enough.
Over the past, since I guess in the past year, there's been so much development and deregulation. What types of licenses individuals can acquire, depending on their criminal background, especially in hazardous materials. I could go on and on. Agricultural developments. But then there's still that gap between criminal justice and the long-term effects of policy and regulation and licensing and new, highly fruitful opportunities. So how do you address that? How do you let people know here are the opportunities that are here for the individual entrepreneur? But at the same time, these are the same things that put huge amounts of our population in jail. How do you address it from a criminal justice standpoint while creating opportunities for regulation and licensing? I'm talking about hemp, for one.
Yeah.
Hazardous materials, hazmat, and the need to have drivers for it, but the regulations on getting a license to become a hazmat driver. I'll let you.
Yeah, so there's a professional licensure piece, and sometimes there's just like a flat out driver's license piece. But go ahead and you want to, Rick?
So I think you have to look at it in very fast, right? I mean, I can't tell you, I manage, $300 million, the top 5 of my clients, 3 of them never graduated from college. Okay, they have labor-driven manufacturing facilities in transportation and waste management. That narrative is, so you don't have to deal with a high hazardous. I mean, there's just a lot of opportunity that's just not sold into our groups of people. They think there's a connection we spoke about earlier. In order to be successful, you have to go to college. Man, that's just, that narrative is not an option. I think people get set up, maybe they set themselves up for failure. You're right. House Bill 1342 was a collaboration of TPPF, us, business owners, industries, and people who were just vested randomly in the process. And I'm sure some legislators listen, God knows, is an act of Congress or the state legislature do anything around here. I always tell people, one of the biggest mistakes you ever make in politics is confuse common sense with politics. It's a bad move, man. It's just a bad move, right? I'm sorry. I'm probably gonna get fired now, and thanks a lot. I'll be sitting outside, and y'all give me a couple of dollars when I'm outside. But I'm just telling you, this is just a bad move. I'm a business guy, right? And our ROI, we have one color, that's green. And so that's how we drive ourselves, and that's what we make. And so you see business owners who are begging for people. I have owners come into me at a commissioner's meeting saying, standing next to the guy who was incarcerated, and say, I need him. And I always tell people, 5% unemployment, anything below that is inefficient, right? You're not high. If I want to grow a company in the state of Texas at 5% unemployment, I'm stealing from other people, or I'm hiring what everybody else didn't want. Just being honest, all right? So we have to increase that inventory, and prison systems have a lot of great, incredible people that could be talented. And so those are things that we have to think about. And so, but it's a collaborating effort. And I just stumbled upon it, right? I met TPPF through my politics, and I made a phone call, and it was happenstance. We have to build systems that collaborate forces that are legislative movers, that are legislators, that are business industries, that kind of come back and come to say, okay, we're going to go for a greater good here. And we can't do it through happenstance. We got to do it through something bigger than that, and develop that system. Because not one of these, not the legislators, not the business owners, not the policymakers, not the lobbyists, hold the key, right? And so anyway, I think that's important to figure out how it works. And I'll tell you the last part, and this is just my 2 cents. I think people I've seen, we're treating symptoms. I think we're just treating symptoms. Family units, fathers out of homes, that's the problem. I'm sorry. I mean, that's just I've seen it. I mean, we can do this all day long, but the system's going to continue to create, and I would tell you that institutions are not parental substitutes. Schools, prisons are not parental substitutes. I am not a parental substitute as a TDR chairman, right? But I'm having to tell my guy who's sitting around, you need to go find you some references. If you come back with some references, I'm having to coach him on how to come to me, right? And I think family units have kind of devolved, and we're paying the price for it. And nobody seems to say anything about it. Everybody seems we're more progressive, but C.S. Lewis said, if you're going the wrong direction, maybe the most progressive thing you can do is turn around and go back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I tag on to that?
Go ahead.
So, you know, it's really about opportunities. We've talked about, I mean, Rick said it, Brian said it, Tim said it. And what we have to do, I think, in this realm for getting former offenders back to work, those with criminal backgrounds, we've got to make sure that we're at every conversation that exists. So for instance, Texas has a 60-30 plan. If you're familiar with it, the 60-30 plan is that by 2030, we need to have 60% of those between the ages of 25 and 34 have either a degree or a certification, okay? Well, if you look at the Wyndham School District, which is the school district inside TDCJ, the average student there is a 9th to 10th grade dropout, 34 years old, and has a 6th grade reading level. They fit right within that echelon, that age group that we're looking at. This is an opportunity we have that our state is giving us. And so when I saw that come out, and I'm now serving on the Texas Board of, the UT Board of Regents, so I've now got into higher ed, but there is a place for post-secondary education with higher ed, which includes not just getting those, you know, degrees, college degrees, to your point, but there's so many of our clients, these folks that have learned a skill, have learned a trade, have a certification, and we need to make sure that when they're getting out, they're applying that to a ready job, whether that's through apprenticeship programs that have already been formed inside the prisons, whether that's in additional training outside, whether that's working with the Texas State Technical College. We have so many opportunities here, but the fact that our higher ed board has said, this is the echelon group we want, and our folks fit right within that, means we've got to be steady, we've got to be at that table, and we've got to be promoting the fact that these folks need those jobs more than anybody.
Right.
Okay, so.
Brian, you want to speak a little bit to that, and then I'll shut us down.
You bet. No, I think as already said, but I think we're at a unique opportunity and we have to seize it and continue. COVID has been a distraction, but it hasn't stopped it, and it can't stop the momentum that we've been making. Over the last 5 years, we have, as an agency, with our reentry services focused on employment, done more with employment than we've ever done in the history of the agency. We've had a higher percentage of people we're able to get jobs, and that is a very measurable way to benefit someone in reentry and measurable way to see success. And getting people out quickly employed, quickly engaged in the employment sector, making sure they're ready for that before they get out. That's our job. But then helping them connect those dots, that's our job, our partners' jobs, and working with the other entities that we do, making sure that that happens. And that the thing that everybody should remember is public safety is keeping people away from us that are dangerous. But it's also having people who, when they get out, they can live next door to you or me, and we don't have to be worried about it because they become productive. That's public safety on a long-term plan. It's a lot harder to achieve, but it's the most successful piece of it.
Yeah, categorically agree. So, so listen, this is one of the most interesting subject matters that I have to say in American political dialogue right now, because I think there actually is. It's October of the year 2020. November is careening down the home stretch here. A bunch of people are ducking and covering and jumping under desks, you know, looking for refuge for what may or may not be coming. One of the things I've most enjoyed about this my work in this space on the federal level and even in some other parts of the world is that you actually find the most earnest people who genuinely are just trying to help people and solve problems convening in this space. These subject matters, you find the noise. There are, at the moment, there are a lot of noisemakers, but that is about to segue and transition, and you will find true problem solvers and truly compassionate people will still be at the table when the noise goes away. And this is the cadre of issues that we can actually reach bipartisan consensus through. The 2014, 15, and 16 process that eventually led to the passage of the First Step Act in 2018. there actually was a lot of, that was a very healing, believe it or not, process. That it was not irreversible, but there were some bridges that were built that for a long time prior to that had been burned. And I'll tell you that my hope and prayer is that that everybody involved in this process in this room and watching online will be a part of the healing process centered around this issue set starting in December and January of 2021, et cetera. When I was in grad school, the first class I took on public policy, the professor just first kind of moments of class said he was a social worker in hospitals for a long time, and he said that he'd spent 20 years of his career at the bottom of the waterfall, at the pool at the bottom of a waterfall, fishing people out of a proverbial waterfall. And after a while, he realized, well, there are a bunch of people fishing people out of a water of that pool. Somebody needed to go to the top of the waterfall to keep people from going over the waterfall. So he began the process of working up the waterfall, and he got to the top of the waterfall to try to prevent people from going over. And he looked upstream and he realized there was a current that was feeding people towards the top of the waterfall. And so he said that basically his career had been a kind of a gradual process of working upstream for, at that point, 35 years of trying to find out where the if you will, kind of the head of the water, what's bringing these people towards the waterfall. And I would just charge all of us. I mean, people here that have taken time to be in a room like this in a time like this, you are here because you want to try to keep people from going over the falls. Forge further up the water, further up to the headwaters of the river, and let's continue that journey together. So thank you all for being a part of this panel today. Thank you to TPPF for convening this and for all the work that this organization has done on these issues and others. And we will continue to forge forward on this.
Thank you. Thank you. You have your card?
Yes.
Okay.